Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. In my last video I talked about a quick fix for painting shadows using complementary colours, and I used this image of a lemon to show firstly how a beginner or an amateur would paint. That's pretty basic, but just to make a point, and how you would do it by painting the shadow first. And this is a follow-up video, part 2 if you like, of using complementaries, but this time I'm going to show you how to do it by blending wet in wet, so that the complementary colours mix together more organically rather than painting the shadow first. Now this is much harder for beginners, and that's why I showed you an easy way to do it. But you have to be careful with complementaries, because sometimes, especially when you're using, say, red and green, which are the complementaries on the colour wheel. So I showed you the colour wheel last time. As I said before, these are readily available online and from good art shops. Red and green are obviously the complementary colours, but it's which red and which green you use can also determine how well your colours blend, and you have to be very careful and practice. It's as simple as that. Try it out on some rough paper first and see which colours work, which two complementaries work better, because there's lots of reds, and let's face it, green is a mixture of yellow and blue, so it's not a prime colour, so you can get various shades of green. So just be careful when you're doing that. But I'm going to demonstrate that as well. I've got a tomato here and there's going to be a green pepper here, so let me get started. As I said before, the blue violet really is the complementary of yellow, so I'm going to use the imperial purple again, but this time, as I said, I'm going to blend it all wet in wet. So the first thing I'm going to do is wet, not too much water, just enough, just wet the shape of the lemon. I'm going to paint around the highlight where the light's coming down and hitting the top, or just this side of the lemon. But I'm going to wet the whole area first. I will put a link to the previous video, should appear at the top right of your screen, and that will take you to another tab. This is cadmium yellow. Let's start just below the top, because I want the top to be much lighter, and as we come down, add more pigment. Try to brush a little bit and get a little bit more pigment. Just rinse the brush, take some of the water out, and just gently blend in to a lighter yellow at the top. Just lifting out with a damp brush. The colour will wash back in, but it's fine. What I'm going to do now, I've got the imperial purple mixed up. I'm just going to mix the two colours together. So let's put it in a separate part of the palette. Some of the yellow. Mix them together. A little bit more purple than yellow. Starting at the base, just dropping it in, letting it blend. Just using the dampness of the brush to maneuver the paint around the image. And this is the terminator line of the shadow. So down here it's going to be darker. Just lifting out a little bit here and there. And then in the shadow, I'm just going to gently use some clean water just to soften the edge of that shadow. And then lift out. And while that's still wet, I can start to add a little bit more pigment. More pigment, less water. Same with the purple. More pigment, less water. Let them just blend together. Start to create that darker shadow underneath the lemon. All the while it's wet, you can carry on adding more pigment. Just don't add too much water because you could end up with cauliflowers and washbacks, and that's the last thing you need. While it's wet, you can manipulate the paint quite easily. And this shadow's bled out a bit too much. I'm just going to lift that out with a piece of kitchen towel, so just to keep the edge of the shadow soft, but at the same time not let it bleed too much into the paper around it. Just going to darken that a little bit more. This is why I say it takes a lot of practice to do this, and once you get the hang of it, you can have a lot of fun with your watercolours. Not forgetting the bit of shadow under the little lemon there, that's it. Maybe just add a little bit more of the yellow pigment up here because it's just starting to look a little bit weaker. Okay, I'm going to leave that to dry and come back to it because now that I've got the basic shape of the shadow in place, I want it to dry because I really want to darken just underneath the lemon, but I need it to be dry to do that. So I'll let it dry. I'll just stop filming for a while it dries, and then I'll come back. Okay, that's now dry, and as you can see, it's a nicely blended shadow. What I'm going to do is just strengthen the shadow beneath the lemon with a mixture of yellow and purple, and then with a very just slightly damp brush, just blend it into the surrounding area. Create that soft edged shadow. Now that it's dry, I can see that I could just do a little bit more pigment on this part of the lemon, just to give it a little bit more body. And then with a clean damp brush, just blend it into the top. And then with a little bit more of that shadow mix, just strengthen the bottom. Again, it's wet in wet, so it should work fine. Just going to lift out a little bit of that there. The trick is to stop fiddling. We're all guilty of that, I guess. I'm just going to paint the little bit of an end to the lemon there. That's it. I think I'm done on that. So that's the lemon. Now I'm going to paint something red, which is obviously a tomato, and do the same thing, blending wet in wet using red and green. So I'm just going to clean the palette and I'll come back. I've mixed up some red. It's basically cadmium red with a tiny amount of pyrrole orange, a very small amount, just to take it to a more orangey red for the tomato. Again, I'm going to start somewhere around the middle and then I'm going to blend upwards. There's quite a lot of reflection on this tomato, so I'm mindful of not painting over those reflections. At the same time, they need to be softer edged as well, so just going to carefully paint around the stalk at the top of the tomato. I want to retain the whiteness of the paper because that's going to be green. Just take a little bit of care when you're doing this sort of thing. Make sure you've got a brush with a nice tip on it. This is an Escoda Prado. They've all got really nice tips on them. It makes it easier to paint subjects like this. Just going to rinse the brush a little bit and then just gently soften and lighten that a little bit. And as we come down underneath the tomato, I can afford to add more pigment. And the green to choose when you're doing this is, you just got to try different greens. This is jadeite green I'm adding here, which is quite a strong dark green, but it does work quite well with cadmium red for shadows, as long as you blend them properly. I mean, I'm just painting the green in to start with. I'm going to add some more of the red into that so that the shadow colour, it blends to form this nice shadow colour made up of the two complementaries. I'm going to paint that into the shadow underneath as well. The light's more vertical on this image, so it's the shadow's a bit more rounded. And while that's still wet, I can just add some more cadmium red pigment into that. Just to strengthen the shadow colour. With just a damp brush, I've taken most of the water out of the brush. I'm just going to soften those highlights a little bit. They're a bit sharp. Smooth the edge of that tomato. It's a bit square there. That's fine. I'm going to add a little bit more cadmium red pigment into this shadow, just to strengthen it a little bit. With almost a dry brush, I'm just going to run the brush along the edge just to lift and soften the edge of the shadow. As before, I'm going to let that dry because I want to just see how the shadow looks once it's dry. I may darken it a little bit underneath the tomato, and I've also got to add the green of the stalk. So I'll just stop the camera for a while I let that dry naturally. Right, the tomato is now dry. I've just mixed the cadmium red and the jadeite green to make this stronger shadow colour. And I'm just going to add that at the base of the tomato, just where it's touching the worktop. Take it up into the tomato. I'm going to add some more cadmium red pigment. Blend it in together, wet and wet. Take it up to the top. Tomato. Darken the area back there. Just around where the highlight's shining on the tomato. And then with a clean, just damp brush, just take the water out, just feather that edge into the reflection. And at the base I'm just going to broaden the shadow area, again with a little bit of clean water. I just want to emphasize that painting shadows with complementaries is not a rule, but more a useful technique. Just paint your shadows whatever colour you want. You're the artist and you should find your own style. There's no right or wrong way to paint watercolours. I paint my way and you should paint yours. By all means learn from videos like this, but there's no substitute for practice to find your own style. I'm just going to paint where there would be a shadow underneath the stalk. In the reflected areas. Well, that's dry now, so I'm just going to paint the stalk. I'm going to start with some sap green, nice light green, and then darken a few areas of the stalk. Just using that jadeite green to add some darker parts of the some darker greens to parts of the stalk. Just makes it look a little bit more lifelike, shall we say. And then just drop a little bit of the red and green mixture right into there. And that's about it for the tomato, I think. So as you can see, you can see how I've blended the red and the green together to create that shadow, strengthening the shadows a little bit on the top. For the green pepper, I'm going to use sap green to start with, and I'll be using alizarin crimson for the red, the complementary to create the shadows. So just going to paint the lightest part of the pepper first, and then add some darker patches as we go along. Trying to paint round some highlights, leave some of the white paper for the highlights, with the lights hitting the pepper, just on the curve there as well. Paint into the shadow area too. What I forgot to do was wet the paper first, but it doesn't matter. This is a nice light colour, so I can get away with it. And while that's wet, I'm going to just grab some alizarin crimson, just drop it in at the base with this sap green, just to start the shadow off. Keep it wet, and I can come in with some more of the sap green and let it mix on the paper, create this shadow area. Just darkening some parts of the pepper with the red and green mix. More green than red up here, but for the shadow, keeping it plenty of red. Sorry if I stop talking while I'm doing this, because I tend to forget that I'm trying to teach people. Just add some more red into this shadow. Let it blend with the green, create this shadow colour. And just drop a little bit more in there. Create some body to the pepper. And again, while that's still wet, just take the edge off that shadow with just a damp brush, just enough to soften it. Oops, wrong colour. Let's mix up some more, slightly stronger. Drop some more green into this top. Part. Same with the body there. Okay, I'm going to let that dry and come back to it and then do the finishing touches. Okay, the peppers are now dry and I need to strengthen the shadow, so I've just mixed the alizarin crimson and the sap green together. Maybe add a little bit more sap green, I think. Just strengthen the shadow underneath the pepper. Again, just feather it out a little bit with some clean water so we don't get a hard edge. With some more of the sap green, I'm just going to add a little bit more colour into the parts of the pepper. Just add a little bit of right, and strengthen the shape a little bit. And with that brush, I'm just going to lift out some of the paint on the top of the pepper, just enough to create a bit more of a highlight along that top edge. And again, just going a little bit darker. The shadow underneath. And there you have it. So I've used yellow and purple, red and green, green and red, complementary colours to create the shadows using the wet in wet technique. It takes a little bit of practice, and I can only suggest you carry on practicing doing this sort of thing. Watching is learning, that's true, but doing is understanding. So the more you paint, the more you'll understand how your paints will work with each other. You get to know your palette and understand it better. So I hope you found this useful. As I said earlier, I've put a link to the previous video, which is about painting shadows first and then adding the colour. Either technique works. This is better from the point of view of a more experienced painter, and in my view I prefer to do this. I've always preferred blending on the paper if I can. It always ends up with a much brighter picture. Remember, when you're painting wet in wet, you're effectively painting one wash. Whereas if you paint something like the shadow and let it dry and then paint the colour over, you're painting two washes. So the fewer washes you paint, the better. It's all a matter of practice and understanding. Sorry if I waffled a little bit. I just wanted to show all the people that requested the how to paint shadows wet and wet. Hopefully those that requested it have learnt something. If you found it useful, do give it a like. It always helps with YouTube. And do subscribe if you're not a subscriber. and hit the notification bell for future videos. I try to post around once a week when I can. And thanks again for watching.